We are beautifully,
Melanated Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Kay.
And I'm Karen. So I'd just like to say thank you to one of our listeners, Omana Faluke, who wrote into us last week regarding our topic on love. What is love? So Omana says, what about people in arranged marriages? You can grow to love your partner. I thought that was a very interesting point. Absolutely. She says it's not always a Mills and Boons story. So I think that she's made a really good point there. So thank you again for that. Please keep your emails coming in. And so we move on swiftly to today's topic, where I'm asking the question, is it the job of school to educate academically only, or are they also there to teach life skills for our children, to offer good citizenship, for example, social, spiritual, philosophical guidance in lessons such as RE, PSHE, and also citizenship lessons, where they might talk about, for example, issues surrounding the LGBTQ plus community. So are schools there to educate just academically, or are they also there to help our children to become well-rounded individuals in society? So I'm going to throw this out to you, ladies. What do you think? I'll come to Kay first.
Thanks, Karen. Short answer is no. I think parenting should remain with the parents. I feel school, the educators are there to educate. But however, there's a caveat. They have our children at their most formative years, and they have them for longer in the day than we do as parents once our children start school. So, for instance, when it was time for sex education at school, at primary school for my children, I didn't feel it was the role of school to teach them about sex. I was a Christian at the time in church, had really strong views about what my children were ready for, or what I felt they were ready for. And at the time, there was not the inclusivity that's now there in the sex education. So there was a video that the school showed, and I asked to see it. So they had a preview for parents the week before they rolled it out to the students. And then you could have the choice whether or not to remove your child from that lesson. And I opted to remove my children on both occasions, even though there was 4.5 years between them, because I wanted to do their sex education. I didn't feel that they should hear it from school first. So I bought the books, the body books, development, body changes, puberty, and I went through it with them the week before it was taught in school. So that by the time they came around to having sex ed, for instance, they knew what to expect. They weren't shocked by it. But also I gave them the context of relationship, which was important to me. I felt the video was too graphic because it showed an erect penis, even though it was animated. And it clearly showed the technicalities of sex, which I felt wasn't appropriate for my children at that time. And so they sat out the lesson, but they weren't anywhere soft than their peers because they had the education from me. So in that, and I think that now too, if they were to have at that point included same-sex relationships, for instance, that would have been a hard no. Absolutely not. I do not want the school to teach my children about same-sex relationship while they're 9 and 10 and 11. I have a different view now. Certainly I would incorporate it in my own sex education that I give them, because same-sex relationships are relationships nevertheless. Love is love, and it's not just about sex. But at the time, I was very anti the school doing what I consider to be a parent role. Same for spirituality. So, the RE lessons, briefly, they touched on all major religions, but I felt very lacking in any depth or substance. So at the time, I would have topped it up as well. So for me, it's a both and. The school has a role. it is not the only role they have. My family values, my ideals that I live by, I feel that I should be the one to teach my children that. And anything else that comes from school is supplementary. The main aim of school is to educate. So, I'm happy for them to do the education, the academic side of it. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
My thoughts have actually changed quite a bit over time. I'd say probably when I was in my late 20s, just before I had my daughter, I would have said that maybe I would be kind of, I don't know, wanting my children maybe not to have those talks first, a bit like yourself, Kay. I was kind of curious about who would be coming into the school and stuff like that. And at the time, my ex-partner he pretty much said that if there was a lesson taught about things like, I don't know, same-sex relationships, etc., that he wouldn't have wanted our daughter to attend that, and he would have signed a paper for her not to. Now, moving on from that, I have quite a different view. I'm very, very liberal, and I'm really open-minded, and my kind of view on it all is don't have a problem with anybody coming into school. I don't have a problem with my daughter being taught about these kind of things and different relationships and different ways of living. That's absolutely fine, because I think for me, I know that I'll also have those conversations a bit like at home, like you do, Kay. I'll always speak to my daughter at home about all sorts of differences in people. I always have done, kind of spoken to her about how everybody's different, and that's okay. And I strongly believe, my belief is, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear around people that are different coming into the school. And I don't think that should be a problem. I really don't think that should be a problem. But I think, is it so extreme to have somebody to say that's trans come into the school? In the society we live in, I really don't think so anymore. And I was just saying to Karen Brown earlier, if they're trying to show difference and equality, then take me to somewhere like Eltham, someone's from Eltham, sorry guys, but take me somewhere really white, and I will go into a school and I will talk about what it's like to be an educated Black woman. How about that? And let's just see what people say in that school. I mean, if we're going to talk about difference, let's go there. Let's not just have people from different sexualities and orientations in school. Let's have, a Black lawyer in the school, or let's kind of break the mold across the bar. So, yeah, my thoughts really are, I don't mind really all sorts of different people coming to school to speak with the kids. My daughter's now 9, so if she'd been any younger, I don't think she'd really understood what the heck was going on. But yeah, I'm open to people coming into school. That's not a problem, because I will have those conversations at home with my daughter. And in my job, I've seen a lot of young people who question their sexuality. And I've seen people that aren't allowed to express themselves and their sexuality because of the church. And I've also seen people hurt themselves, cut themselves and hurt themselves and want to end their lives because they can't be who they want to be. And I would refuse to ever have anybody that I care about feel like that. So, yeah, that's my views on it.
That's really, really interesting point you brought there, Sarah, because I too, like yourself, work with young people in schools. And a very sad thing happened when I worked in a particular secondary school. There was a girl whose parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and she was struggling with her sexuality at the time. She didn't feel that she could be open and honest with her parents, and she took her life. It really affected her. And I think it affects a lot of people. So I suppose I'm thinking about this specifically within our community, within the Black community. And I think there is a lot of stigma attached to sexuality, possibly because it could be linked to religion. So I know someone else who has taken their child out of mainstream school and have taken them, sent them to a Christian faith school because she herself is Christian. It was very, very important to her that her child be brought up in the Christian faith. She felt that the school almost have their own agenda, I think is how she described it. She was talking about the school having an agenda, and she didn't feel that the school was necessarily sort of trying to educate children in a holistic way, but rather more kind of pushing a particular opinion. And she felt so strongly about it, like I say, that she removed her child from the school. So I suppose I'm just thinking of it from both sides. She is a parent. She has her views. She is Christian. Is it right for her to remove her child? Obviously, legally you can. But does that mean that then her child is not being educated about diversity, difference, tolerance, and all those things that are also important? And what if the mum is not providing her with that information either? Because obviously mum is approaching her parenting from a particular view, with a particular view from a certain angle. So when, what line is there? Do we feel that school is crossing that line into, trying to parent? Or is it right that school intervene and perhaps teach children about things that maybe they wouldn't learn at home? Remember, ladies, you are very liberal. You're very open. You both said that, you do a lot of your parenting at home. Karen Kay, rather, you talked about getting books and looking at those with your children. But some parents perhaps don't have those views, or perhaps don't have those skills even, and are not able to introduce those sorts of topics with their children. I attended my cousin's same-sex wedding. It was a beautiful, beautiful wedding, a really lovely day. First one in our family. But I do still think that within our community, there is still a lot of, let's say, I think, there's some difficulty in accepting same-sex relationships. And so, yeah, I'm just
Karen,
thinking, yes.
Can I ask, just to be clear, when you said struggling with the young lady who took her life, sadly, was struggling with her sexuality, what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so she felt different to she perceived that she felt differently to other girls. I think she felt that she had some attraction to other girls in her class or in her school, her peers. And I think she was wrestling with it. And I think where she didn't have perhaps a platform, or, she didn't have a comfortable space where she could discuss it, because this is quite a few years ago, before I think it was so widely talked about in schools. She confided in a member of staff that, she had been thinking that maybe she did have gay tendencies. And so, like I say, because her parents were Jehovah's Witness, they were of the opinion that that was wrong. And I think there was a lot of guilt and shame, like Sarah mentioned, a lot of guilt and shame about feeling or having these feelings, not knowing quite where to go and what to do with it.
So I remember growing up thinking same-sex attraction was a sin. It's not a thought, I was taught it, that same-sex attraction was a sin. So no matter what the school would have put on the curriculum, whether or not I had been taught about non-binary, gender fluidity, pansexuality, no matter what would have been on the curriculum when I was growing up, the only option available to me as a child of Christians was heterosexuality. And I could not have said to my parents, I have a same-sex attraction, even if I did, because that was not only just frowned on, it's considered an abomination. And listen to how strong these words are. You're going to hell. God does not approve. It's an abomination. It's not just a sin, it's an abomination, because the Bible says so. So any child, and then step outside of the church and into the Black community, the songs we listened to were very homophobic. Not everyone, but I grew up in Jamaica, so I'm thinking of a particular song that I used to dance to by Buju, one of my favorite artists, and I'm not going to name the song, but yeah, that song was played widely. So even if a young person felt that they had a same-sex attraction, where would they go? Because they can't go to church. that wouldn't have been a safe place to say to your pastor, I'm struggling with say, or I'm attracted to my same sex. You're not going to be able to tell your parents about it. Maybe school would have been the only safe place for a young person to have a conversation with someone about their sexuality, where they weren't afraid of being stigmatized, cast out, physically or verbally attacked or condemned. So in that sense, school does have a vital role for a young person to explore before it gets to the point of taking their own lives. That is really tragic that it had come to that. Yeah. So I suppose thinking about it, school does have a place. And the curriculum, I hear, has grown since my children were in school. So there's now much more wider discussion. LGBTQIA plus is taught in schools. And I have a lot of friends who are Christians who viscerally react to that, will not have their children a part of those lessons. So again, it shrinks us back into heterosexuality as our only choice. For me, that's where school will hold its own.
So I just want to say something really quickly to what you've just said there, Kay. I want to play devil's advocate slightly and say some families I've heard have commented and said, school is pushing this, it's encouraging behaviour. Where my child or where my son had no business wearing a dress, they're encouraging him to do so. They feel as if sexuality can be changed through teaching.
Wow.
I just wonder what your thoughts are, both of you, on where sexuality comes from. Is it innate?
Yeah,
are we born with it? You think that's fair?
I just think this is the same kind of realms as the people that say, oh, well, you're gay, so you must fancy me. It's that kind of thing. It's that kind of narrow-minded thinking that say I was a lesbian woman, then I must fancy everyone that's female. It's that narrow-minded thinking. That's my view. They're the same kind of people that say, oh, well, you're going, if you're going to be taught this at school, then you're going to become this. This is, to me, that's rubbish. So I'm saying, if someone, I believe, in my opinion, that if somebody is going to wear a dress, they wanted to wear a dress before the person came in wearing a dress. That makes sense. This is not like someone came in wearing a dress, they're going to go, oh, gosh, I know what I'll do. I'll wear a dress. I feel like there's something already in there that made them want to wear a dress in the first place. The person coming in a dress, if they didn't come into school in a dress, they're going to see somebody else somewhere in their life in a dress and they're going to do it. So I don't honestly think, I just don't think it's someone of a different sexuality coming to school isn't going to suddenly turn someone or something. That is just, that thinking is, to me, very much like, oh, you're standing next to a gay person, so you're going to you're going to become gay. It's that kind of narrow-minded chatter. That's my view on it.
Sarah. Absolutely agree. Sexuality is not a choice. It's nature, it's not nurture. Most homosexual people or gay people are raised by straight people anyway. So if it was a choice, then being raised by fundamental, strong Christians, then nobody would be gay. It is a spectrum. You have the part at which you experiment as you come into your sexual identity and sexual development. And for some people, bisexuality is where they land. Some people will land at heterosexuality and some will be homosexual. It is not catching. It is not something that if it's on the curriculum, therefore you are now going to be so. Absolutely not. That's nonsense. It's not just fear-based. It's actually ridiculous. And I'm thinking, for marginalized people, we can't be out here clamoring for equality and fairness for ourselves, but then oppress another group. We're literally perpetuating the same thing, but to another marginalized group. So in the same way you can't catch blackness, you can't catch sexuality.
Exactly.
I totally agree with so much of what you said, but I'm going to throw something in there again. Okay, so let's just say there's a girl at school. She's 14 years old, 15, let's say. And like you say, there is a spectrum, right? So she might be sort of experimenting. So she has a best friend. They get on really, really well. I think I've heard the word girl crush thrown around quite a lot. So she might have a girl crush on her friend. So she really likes her. They get on really, really well. And she started to have, feelings or emotions towards this friend. Do you think it's possible that she may consider herself to be bisexual or possibly gay because we've said as a society or at school have taught that actually it's okay to experiment, it's okay to be free, it's okay to see where you land on that spectrum. Do you think that that has encouraged exploration in a way that perhaps it wouldn't have had we not taught this? I'm going to throw that. No, you don't think so?
No, I think it was always experimental. I think it just wasn't mainstream or talked about. We haven't discovered anything. There is nothing new under the sun.
I agree. This has been going on Victorian times and before that.
You know, it was done in the dark, it was done in the shadows, but it was done. The only newness about this is that schools have it on the curriculum and they make it open and much more accessible for some children to understand their development. And whether or not it was on a curriculum, there will always be experimentation. I think if we were to check all our grannies and our great grannies, we would be surprised if they were honest with us about their sexual development.
That's interesting.
They're not.
That is interesting. You know, the other thing I was thinking as well is that I have met, I would say, about 5 young girls who all have either very poor relationships with their fathers or absent fathers. And these 5 girls have all come out and said, you know, I think I'm bi or gay. And I wondered if, and this just throwing this out there, I'm wondering if having a poor relationship or a non-existent relationship with a father can also affect our choices. I have no idea, but it's a question. I just wonder if now that we're saying, yes, it's okay to experiment in a way that we never used to, are these all factors that sort of contribute to our choices and what young people are now experimenting with?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I'd have probably said it goes the other way. I'd say probably a young girl that has issues with the father's not there at all. I'd say they'd be more inclined to go wild with certain type of men more than necessarily looking for a woman. I have met people in my career that have had very abusive situations with men and they have turned to a woman. But in my experience, someone without a father role, if a person's going to categorize them going somewhere, they're more likely to be wanting a man because their dad wasn't there, not necessarily wanting a woman. Obviously, everyone's different, of course. But in my experience with work, they'd more likely be a person that's trying to find dad through a number of different boys or men. So I don't think that really plays much of a role. By what you're saying, Karen. That's just my experience, though.
I'd agree, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'd agree, because if you think of the Oedipal complex, and that's quite Freudian, or the Electra complex, in Freud's psychosexual stages of development, if successfully resolved, then a young girl will realize she can't marry her dad, and she's a girl, and mom is going to teach her how to be a woman. And a boy realizes he can't marry his mom, although he wants to be the sole object of her affection as the girl with her dad. And that, you know, he will become a man one day like dad, and dad will teach him how to be a man. So if we keep it very Freudian and keep the Oedipal complex very simple, then the unsuccessful resolution of that psychosexual stage, ages 3 to 5, as Sarah said, it would be more likely she would be looking for a replacement father figure with whom to work through this Oedipal phase, the father who is not there to be the object of her affection, so forth, so on. So it has no links to sexuality at all. There are a host of the mental health challenges and difficulties that can come with having an absent father. Your sexuality isn't one of them. I mean, I would be very, very gay, but I am heterosexual.
The only reason why I say that, and what you said actually makes a lot of sense. I'm just thinking about the fact that some young girls who haven't had a father figure or haven't seen mum or anyone else in healthy heterosexual relationships, sometimes might gravitate, like I say, towards a friend. And I think the kind of relationship you have with your girlfriend would be very different to one that you might have with a boy. So, like I say, I've met several young people who have come out as bisexual or gay. They've had female relationships, tried them, and then tried boys. And so, like I say, that they're experimenting. I would say 4 of the girls I'm talking about have gone on to have boyfriends. And I do think it was experimental, but I'm just wondering where that's come from. We seem to be, in my opinion, more open to exploring and experimenting than we used to, although you disagree with that. Okay, you said that actually you think we've been doing this for years and our grandparents are doing it, but we're just not aware.
I think this generation is just not inclined to hide it. They are out there, they're in our faces, and they're not going to hide it. And if a boy wants to wear a dress, he's going to wear it loud and proud. And if a girl wants to shave her head, so forth, so on. It's that this generation is much more open, much more inclusive, I would say. I would also say they're much more accepting of their peers and of difference than our generation was. So they're not doing anything new. I promise you, there's nothing new under the sun. We're humans. We're creatures of habit. We're just repeating patterns. Where some parents struggle with school and the curriculum, I would say that has also probably something to do with their own value system, whether that's a faith-based one or not, rather than the school puts it on the curriculum, therefore you're going to make my child something they're not. Or again, you can look at the age and stage of development. Like I did. For my children, I knew they would be shocked to see that video, the animated video of sex, because they weren't ready. So I made that decision based on their development, but not because of anything else. But at the time when they were ready, then we had that conversation about how sex happens. I think like I said, I feel very strongly that having come the other way, Karen, I was also very homophobic in my early years. That's what I was taught. That's the society I grew up in. I embraced those ideals. So, I'm recovered. But I feel quite strongly now that the minute we start to oppress another group based on difference or othering and insist that heterosexuality is the only way to express sexuality, we are no different to people oppressing us because we're different. Because their belief is that whiteness is superior and anything else is inferior. We're now saying heterosexuality is superior, it's the God-given choice, and everything else is inferior, therefore we oppress. So we need to be really careful about that.
Any final words from you, Sarah?
No, I think you ladies have covered it all. Yeah, I think you ladies have covered it all.
I did just want to add one last thing about school, Karen, and the curriculum. One of my major issues with the curriculum when my children were in school, primary and secondary, was the lack of diversity in the curriculum, was teaching children about the slave trade and not teaching them about Black history, or history didn't begin with slavery. So when you perpetuate that stereotype that Black people were slaves from that primary school age, that's what children grow up to think about Black people. So when I look at the curriculum at secondary school, there are no Black texts on the curriculum, no Black authors. So in the same way that I got the books to teach my children about their sexual development, I also got books to teach them about their history. And my bookcase is full of Black authors because I had to also do that bit of educating. So school does fall short for me in terms of even the academia. There's just not enough representation and diversity. There are no Black scholars. Why are we still reading Of Mice and Men, for instance? That's still a GCSE text, which has the N-word in it. Why? Are we serious? So, to end, for me, my final word from where we started, school educates, and I'll hold them to that. But for me, they're still coming up short.
I completely agree. I think as a parent, I've had to fill in a lot of blanks. Absolutely. History is taught incorrectly, actually. And it's not just our Black children that need to know that actually there were great empires of Mali, for example. Actually, white children need to know that too. I think that would put an end to racism, though, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. If the truth were actually told.
Absolutely.
So that's another podcast altogether. That's another episode. However, going back to sex relationships taught in school, the thing I also think is missing is emotion. I think that I wouldn't teach about sex without adding in the emotion. That's something I've done with my eldest. We've talked about that you do grow attachments. It's not just the physical, it's the emotional side too. And that you would want to be ready as much as you can to be able to engage in that kind of activity so that you're emotionally ready as well. It's not, like I say, it's not just physical. So absolutely, school does desperately fall short. And as a parent, I do my best to fill in the gaps. But yeah, I think we should have a conversation about the lack of Black history, or the lack of accuracy, shall I say, in history taught in school. That's another episode.
Yes, I totally agree. Definitely another episode. But yes, we have lots to talk about. Thank you, ladies, for another really engaging conversation. We would love to hear from you. Keep your letters coming and your feedback. If you are okay for us to read your letters out or your feedback, please let us know when you write to us. Follow us on Instagram. And thank you for listening for another week. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
We are beautifully